The aliens in the gallery exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering to each other in hushed tones. They had doubted human law, doubted human calm. But now they had seen why humanity's authority carried such weight across the galaxy, not because of weapons, not because of armies, but because of will, because even in silence they commanded respect. The guards at the door stood straighter, their eyes fixed on the judge, waiting, ready, not because she needed their protection, but because she had already shown she did not. The drones above drifted back to their posts, their lights dimming, no longer needed. The room itself seemed to exhale, releasing the tension that had held. Every chest tight, the judge struck her gavel one final time, declaring the session closed, her voice firm but calm, her presence unshaken. The audience rose slowly, hesitant, as if afraid their footsteps might disturb the heavy truth left behind. The rookie officer remained still, unable to move, until a guard gently placed a hand on his shoulder and guided him out. His steps unsteady, his face pale, his laugh gone forever. Outside the chamber, whispers spread quickly through the corridors, voices carrying the story to every corner of the colony. Some called it a lesson, others a warning. All agreed it was. Unforgettable, the tale would travel farther than the walls of that court. It would echo through taverns, through training halls, through alien embassies. The story of the day, a young officer laughed at a black judge's orders, and the silence that followed crushed him more completely than any punishment. Back in the courtroom, the judge gathered her papers slowly, her eyes still sharp, her face calm, but deep within her thoughts, stirred with memories of battles long past. Scars of war that had shaped her into the figure she was now. She rose from the bench, her robe flowing as she stepped away, and those who remained lowered their eyes as she passed. None dared meet her gaze directly, for in that moment they knew. They had not simply watched a trial. They had witnessed a reminder that humans, born from a death world, carried strength far beyond what arrogance could ever challenge, and that truth would outlast laughter, outlast pride, outlast even time itself. The security drones above hummed faintly, their glowing eyes shifting slightly, waiting for the smallest signal from her hand. The patrol guards at the far wall kept still, but their attention was sharp. The entire court understood that if she gave the word, the rookie would be dragged out in disgrace. Yet she had not done so. Her power was not in force, but in control. She allowed him to stand in the storm of his own making, his arrogance crumbling into dust for all to see. And that was punishment enough. The aliens in the chamber exchanged uneasy looks, their expressions telling of old memories. They had fought humans before, or heard the stories of Death-worlders, who turned chaos into order with nothing but their will, of commanders whose silence could cut deeper than war cries. And now they were seeing it with their own eyes, not on a battlefield, but in a courtroom. And the truth unsettled them. One alien elder leaned to another and whispered that this was why humans ruled by respect even when outnumbered, because they carried their law like a blade that never dulled. The rookie officer's knees wavered, the sweat now visible along his temples. He tried to lift his chin, to reclaim some sliver of dignity, but his voice betrayed him when he finally spoke. Breaking into a nervous quiver, he said that he had only been speaking the truth. That law was weak without force, but even he could hear the emptiness in his words. The judge tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharp and cold, and told him that weakness was believing that only violence makes order. She said that she had commanded soldiers before, and she had seen men with weapons collapse faster than men with principles. Her eyes darkened as she spoke, a shadow crossing them as if she were remembering battlefields she never spoke of, burned skies, broken fleets, the cries of the fallen. Her voice dipped lower, telling him she had buried arrogance many times before, and it had always sounded just like him. The chamber grew colder with her words, a ripple of unease spreading. Through the audience, the rookie swallowed hard, his throat dry, his shoulders sinking as the truth crushed what little defiance he had left. The judge lifted her gavel slowly, tapping it once more, and this time it was not for order but for finality. She told him that the court did not exist to humiliate him, but to remind everyone watching that justice was not a performance, it was survival. She declared that in this courtroom, arrogance finds no shelter. Her voice carried like iron, and the silence that followed was absolute. The rookie lowered his head at last, his hands trembling at his sides. The chamber watched him crumble, and in that moment the lesson was burned into every witness. No one laughed. No one dared move. The very air seemed carved with the truth that humans, born from the harshest world in the galaxy, carried a law within them that no arrogance could mock. The rookie had thought he could belittle the black judge with a laugh, but what followed was his undoing, and the courtroom would never forget the sight of silence breaking a man far quicker than war. The young officer's head hung low, his arrogance shattered. But the moment did not end there. The chamber was still heavy, every being present waiting for what the judge would do next. The black human judge remained still, her hands folded before her, her robe dark against the polished desk, her silence stretching until it pressed into the very bones of the room. The rookie shifted uneasily, his boots scraping the floor, his pride still clawing at him, though he had nothing left to hold. He finally lifted his face, his voice weak but desperate, saying that he had only spoken because he believed law without strength was meaningless. His tone was almost pleading now, as if begging her to accept his excuse. The crowd stirred at his words, some shaking their heads, others leaning forward to see how she would answer. The judge's gaze sharpened, her eyes cutting into him like cold fire, and when she spoke, her voice was low but unbreakable. She told him that law itself is strength, that justice outlasts weapons, and that those who laugh at it reveal not courage but fear. Her words echoed across the chamber, sinking deep into every ear. The rookie flinched as though struck, his chest rising, quickly with shallow breaths, his earlier smirk now only a memory. The drones above hummed faintly, their red lights glowing like silent witnesses. The guards near the doors stood taller, their hands still but ready, not because they feared chaos, but because they were responding to her presence, her authority filling the room so completely that no command was needed. The aliens seated in the gallery whispered softly, their voices tense, remembering the stories of humans, stories of death-worlders who faced storms, predators, and wars. With the same calm silence, stories of commanders who never raised their voices yet commanded armies greater than any fleet. The rookie felt those whispers too, each one another stone on his back. He tried to steady himself, forcing his chin up, but his eyes betrayed him, flickering with doubt, fear, and shame. The judge leaned forward slightly, her face calm, her voice like a blade drawn slow. She told him that his laughter had already been judged, not by her alone, but by everyone who had witnessed it. She said the silence that followed his laugh was louder than any verdict, because the courtroom itself had turned against him, and nothing could undo that. The rookie's mouth opened, but no sound came. His pride was broken completely now. The chamber watched him crumble with a kind of cold fascination. He had mocked authority and found himself undone not by punishment, not by force, but by the quiet weight of law carried by a human judge whose history stretched beyond his imagination. The moment stretched long, so long that it felt eternal, until finally he lowered his head again, his defeat plain for all to see. The judge tapped her gavel once, a sound that sealed his humiliation, and she declared in calm tones that arrogance had no place in her court, that order would not bend to mockery. The crowd remained silent, no applause, no shouts, only the heavy respect that follows true authority. The rookie officer's shoulders slumped, and in that instant he was no longer a challenger but a lesson. His laugh turned into a warning that would live on in whispers. The courtroom would carry it, The colony would retell it, and the galaxy would remember the day when a young officer mocked a black judge's orders, and what followed left the entire court silent under her gaze. The chamber's silence lingered long after the gavel strike, a silence so deep it felt carved into the walls themselves. The rookie officer stood motionless, his head bowed, his pride stripped away in front of humans and aliens alike. The black human judge remained seated, her presence filling the room like an unshaken pillar, calm yet immovable. The crowd did not stir. No one dared break the stillness, for they had all witnessed something far greater than a clash of words. They had seen arrogance shattered by authority that did not need to shout. They had seen law stand taller than pride. The judge leaned back slightly in her chair, her voice low but steady, carrying across the chamber like a quiet storm. She told the courtroom that strength built on arrogance collapses, but strength built on justice endures. Her words rolled through the air, heavy and final, and everyone listening knew they would carry them long after they left the hall. The rookie tried to lift his head, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words came. The weight of her judgment pressed too hard. He swallowed and lowered his eyes again, his silence now louder than his earlier laugh, his defeat plain to all, whispers rippling outward. The aliens shifted uneasily, for they knew the stories. They had heard of human commanders who had turned hopeless wars into victories, who had stood on the ashes of worlds and forced enemies to surrender. The rookie's lips parted, his smirk gone, his breath short. The chamber's silence deepened. The drones hummed faintly above as if holding the moment still. The judge leaned back in her chair now, her expression unchanged, but her presence heavy as a mountain. She told him he mistook kindness for weakness, silence for fear, law for fragility, and that his mistake was the same mistake many enemies of humanity had made before him, mistakes that had ended in silence far deeper than this courtroom. Her words settled into every corner, and the audience stared at the rookie, not with curiosity anymore, but with judgment. His arrogance lay exposed, flimsy and small against the truth she carried. He shifted again, his throat dry, his chest tight. Realizing too late that he had not only disrespected a judge, he had awoken something much older, much stronger. The authority of a death-worlder whose past was carved into every word she spoke. And as the silence stretched, his heart raced with the heavy knowledge that nothing he said now could undo what he had already stirred. The chamber seemed to shrink around the rookie officer. The tall walls and glowing banners no longer felt like symbols of pride, but like witnesses to his humiliation. His smirk was gone now, replaced by the twitch of nerves he could not hide. His eyes darted to the crowd as if looking for support, but there was none. Every face, human and alien alike, stared back at him with a mixture of shock, disbelief, and judgment. The silence after the judge's words pressed on him like gravity. Heavier with each breath, the judge herself did not move. Her hands folded, her gavel resting lightly as though she did not need to strike it again, her eyes never leaving his, sharp and steady. The kind of eyes that belonged not to someone protected by robes, but to someone who had already faced death and survived it. When she finally spoke again, her voice was not raised, but it carried the strength of command. She told him that respect was not demanded by shouting nor earned by arrogance. It was commanded by presence, and her presence now was enough to still the entire room. The rookie's throat tightened. He wanted to argue, to push back, but his words stuck like stones. His pride fought against the fear rising in him. He tried to laugh again, but the sound came out hollow, weak, and it died quickly in the silence of the chamber. The audience leaned closer, waiting for what would follow. The judge lifted her gavel and tapped it once more, and this time the sound was not just noise, it was like a signal. The drones hovering above shifted lower, their lights brightening, their sensors locking on him, the patrol guards at the edge of the room straightened sharply, their hands near their weapons but waiting, not for his action but for her word. He looked around, his chest tightening. realizing that every machine, every officer in that chamber moved at her command. Not his, not the military's, hers. The realization drained the last of the arrogance from his face, leaving only pale unease. The judge leaned forward slightly, her voice calm as she told him that law was the backbone of civilization, that without it, soldiers were only blades with no hand to guide them. She reminded him that armies crumble when leaders are arrogant, but courts endure because truth does not fear time. Her words cut into him deeper than any shout could. The aliens in the gallery nodded slowly, some whispering that she spoke not just as a judge, but as someone who had lived what she said. Someone who had seen arrogance bring empires down. The rookie shifted, his boots scraping the floor as he tried to stand taller, but the sweat on his brow betrayed him. He had come into the chamber with laughter, but now the silence itself was his enemy. Pressing, suffocating, unrelenting. The judge did not strike again. She did not need to. Her silence was the gavel, her eyes the verdict. And the rookie officer realized in that moment that he had mocked not just her words, but the very weight of humanity's history, a history written in war, in survival, in unyielding defiance. And the courtroom understood the same. The arrogance of one man had collapsed beneath the authority of a death-worlder, who needed no weapon to command obedience, only her presence, her silence, and the truth she carried like a blade no one could see but everyone could feel. The rookie officer stood trembling, though he tried to mask it, his uniform suddenly feeling too tight across his chest, sweat tracing down the back of his neck as every eye in the chamber weighed on him. His earlier arrogance was gone, stripped away by the sharp calm of the judge's presence, yet pride still clawed at him, forcing him to open his mouth once more. His voice cracked as he insisted that law was fragile, that words could not hold. Back chaos, that soldiers like him were the true strength of any colony. His tone rose, desperate now, but each word felt smaller than the last, swallowed by the heavy silence of the chamber. The judge did not answer right away. She let his words hang and die in the air, her expression unchanged, her eyes steady until the murmurs of the crowd faded into stillness again. Then she leaned forward slightly, her gavel tapping once, a sound so sharp it felt like a strike to the heart. Her voice followed, calm and steady, yet every syllable struck harder than a blade. She told him that he had mistaken force for strength and arrogance for courage. She said she had stood where worlds burned, where soldiers screamed, where fleets collapsed into ash, and she had seen young men like him, too proud to listen, too blind to see, break long before the enemy ever reached them. Her words froze the room because they were not spoken as theory, they were memory, the tone of someone who had lived through the things she described. The rookie's knees weakened, his breath shallow, his eyes flickering as if searching for escape. But the chamber held him tight. The audience felt the truth in her voice, and even the alien counselors, who once looked skeptical, now lowered their eyes with respect. The judge continued, telling him that law was not a weakness, but the shield that kept civilizations from tearing themselves apart, that soldiers without law became only destroyers, but law without soldiers could still outlast them all, because truth and justice did not die when weapons were lowered. Her robe, she said, was not cloth. It was the weight of every oath she had carried, every life she had protected, every sacrifice etched into her past. She reminded him that humanity itself came from a death world, a place where survival was not a gift but a fight. And it was law, not force, that allowed them to rise from chaos into order. Her words echoed across the chamber like rolling thunder, and the silence after each sentence grew heavier, pressing down on the rookie officer, until he shook visibly, his eyes no longer meeting hers, his arrogance finally crushed under the truth of what she was. The audience leaned forward, breaths held, The aliens who had once smirked at the rookie's boldness now sat stiff and silent, remembering their own stories of humans, remembering why the galaxy feared and respected them, not just for their soldiers, but for their unbreakable will. The rookie tried to speak again, but his throat closed, the words dying before they left his lips. The judge watched him for a long moment, then leaned back in her chair, her hands folded neatly, her voice soft yet final as she told him that arrogance always breaks, but truth does not. The gavel struck once more, the sharp crack filling the chamber, sealing her words like a verdict. Written in stone, the rookie bowed his head, his pride shattered, and for the first time since entering the room, he looked small, smaller than his uniform, smaller than his voice. Just a young man who had tried to measure himself against something far greater than he could comprehend. The chamber remained silent. No applause, no outburst, only the heavy weight of respect, and every being present knew they would never forget the moment when laughter tried to challenge law, and law answered with silence stronger than any weapon. The chamber still carried the echo of the gavel strike, sharp and final, like thunder that refuses to fade. The rookie officer stood frozen in place, his chest rising and falling too quickly. The flush of pride drained from his face, leaving only pale shame. The audience sat stiff in their seats, afraid to whisper, as though the weight of the judge's words had pinned them all in silence. The black human judge did not move. She sat, tall in her chair, her robe falling heavy around her, her eyes fixed on the young man who had dared to laugh at her authority. Yet her voice, when it came, was steady, almost calm. She told him that arrogance is the weakness of the untested, that real strength is quiet, patient, and unyielding. Her words did not rise in anger, but they struck deeper than any shout, each syllable falling heavy on the young officer's pride. His lips parted, but no answer came, only a dry breath as if the air itself refused to help him. The galactic courtroom stood like a cathedral of law, its tall walls lined with banners of many species, each color and symbol telling of unity and peace. Yet inside that vast chamber the air was tense, for cases heard here often carried the weight of entire colonies. Humans and aliens filled the seats, their whispers low, their eyes focused on the bench where a black human judge sat with calm authority. Her gavel resting in her hand like an extension of her will, she had just delivered a ruling, her voice steady, clear, and final. But the words had not even faded when a sound broke through the silence, sharp and careless. A chuckle. All heads turned at once toward the source. A young rookie officer in uniform, his body leaning back in his chair, his lips curled in a mocking grin. The sound of his laughter felt like a slap across the chamber. No one laughed at a judge here. Not humans, not aliens, not even the boldest. Mercenaries who once faced war councils. Yet he had done it without hesitation. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. It pressed against the walls, against the hearts of every being present, and for a moment even the air itself seemed to hold its breath. The judge's face did not change. She did not frown. She did not raise her voice, but her eyes grew sharper. Like blades hidden behind calm waters, she looked at the young officer with a steady gaze, and though her lips did not move, the room felt her authority tighten like an invisible grip. The officer shifted slightly, but kept his smirk, his youth and arrogance shining brighter than sense. He believed he was untouchable. He believed his uniform and his position gave him a shield. He leaned forward slightly, his voice breaking the silence as he muttered that her ruling was soft, that real power was not spoken from a bench but enforced with soldiers and weapons. His words rippled across the chamber, and several aliens stirred in their seats, their eyes narrowing, some nodding faintly, because they too had doubted human law. They had heard of human wars but struggled to believe that words could hold the same weight as fire. The judge tapped her gavel once, a single sound that cracked through the air like thunder. Her voice calm but carrying the power of command as she told him that in this court, rank meant nothing. In this court, the law stood. Above all, her words were not loud, but they rolled through the chamber like a wave. Silencing every whisper, the officer chuckled again, though this time softer, a nervous edge creeping into the sound. He raised his chin and asked if she could truly enforce her orders without an army at her back. His grin widened, but his eyes betrayed the faint tremble of doubt. The crowd gasped quietly, some clutching their hands, others shaking their heads, because this was not just disrespect, it was provocation. The judge did not answer right away. Her silence stretched long, heavy, pressing against the young man until the smirk on his face began to falter. Her eyes never left his, sharp and unblinking. As if she were measuring his soul, finally she spoke. Her tone even colder now, telling him that authority does not live in weapons. It lives in truth, in justice, in the will of those who stand by it. She told him that power earned through fear is fragile, but power earned through law is unbreakable. Her words landed heavy, like stones dropped in still water, and ripples of unease spread through the chamber. The rookie shifted in his seat, his arrogance cracking. But still he tried to laugh once more. The sound dry, hollow, and the chamber did not echo it. No one joined him. No one dared. Every eye was locked on him now, not with admiration, but with condemnation. Even the alien counselors leaned forward, their eyes glowing with warning. The weight of the room turned against him, and still the judge did not move. She only sat taller, her gavel steady in her hand, her eyes sharp as steel. And in that moment, the young officer understood what he had stirred. Not just a courtroom, but the authority of an entire species. The authority of humanity itself, born on a death world, carried through war, sharpened by survival. And though she had not raised her voice, though she had not left her seat, the silence she commanded crushed him more than 100 soldiers ever could. The laughter that had begun as arrogance now sat heavy in his throat. Unable to escape, the courtroom waited, tense and still, knowing something had shifted, that the young officer had crossed a line from which there was no return, and that whatever came next would not just be a lesson for him, but for everyone watching. The silence after the rookie officer's laugh lingered in the chamber like a storm cloud that refused to pass. Eyes shifted from the judge to the young man, and though his smirk remained on his lips, his shoulders carried the weight of every stare in the room. The judge leaned forward slightly, her gaze unbroken, her calm composure hiding the steel beneath. She asked him in a quiet voice to stand and explain himself. Her words were soft, but they carried across the courtroom as if the walls themselves repeated them. The officer hesitated, his grin faltering before he rose with deliberate slowness, his boots clicking against the polished floor. He adjusted his uniform and cleared his throat, trying to show confidence. He declared that law was nothing without force, that courts were only stages without soldiers to enforce their words. His voice rang through the chamber, but it sounded hollow, too sharp, too desperate. The aliens in the audience whispered among themselves, some nodding with interest, others shaking their heads in disbelief, because though many races respected strength, there was something about his arrogance that unsettled them. The judge let him finish without interruption, her hands folded neatly before her, her eyes never leaving his face. When he stopped, expecting anger or a sharp rebuke, she only asked him if he had ever fought a battle where law did not follow. The question froze him, his lips parting but no answer coming. Because he had never been tested, never seen war, never commanded lives. He was a rookie with more pride than experience. His silence gave her the answer she already knew. She told him softly that she had stood where battles raged, where chaos reigned, and she had seen soldiers crumble without law. But she had never seen law crumble without soldiers. Her voice was calm but heavy, and the chamber grew still, the weight of her words pulling every whisper down. The officer swallowed hard, his throat dry, his smirk gone now, replaced by the uneasy twitch of his jaw. Yet he tried again, asking if her strength was only in words, if she truly believed order could survive without power behind it. and for the first time she let a faint smile touch her lips, a smile without warmth. She raised her gavel and struck it once, the sound booming through the chamber like the crack of thunder, and as it echoed, the security drones that lined the high walls descended silently, their glowing eyes fixed on the young officer. They did not move until her gavel touched the desk. And yet in that instant everyone understood that her word alone had brought them to life. The officer stepped back, his bravado slipping further. The room watched in silence, no one daring to breathe too loudly, because the lesson was becoming clear. Authority did not need noise. It did not need laughter or arrogance. It needed only the will to be carried. And hers was a will that had faced far worse than one untested officer. Her eyes locked on him once more, sharp as blades, and she told him that every empire falls when arrogance believes it stands above law. The courtroom shivered with her words, and the rookie officer realized he was standing not before a simple judge, but before the weight of humanity's history, a history that had silenced far greater enemies than him. The rookie officer stood frozen, his hands trembling slightly, though. He tried to hide it by keeping them locked behind his back. The weight of the judge's words pressed against him like a heavy stone, yet his pride refused to crumble completely. His voice cracked as he tried to speak again, saying that judges like her only ruled in rooms, far from the dangers of real battle, that she had never faced the front lines where soldiers bled and died. His words rang loud but carried no conviction. His arrogance fighting against the growing fear in his chest, the audience murmured at his audacity. Some aliens leaned forward with interest. Others shook their heads, unable to believe a mere rookie dared to speak so boldly against a human judge. The judge did not interrupt. She let the words spill, her face calm, her eyes steady, but behind. That silence her memory stirred. Images of war, of burning skies and ruined fields, of soldiers who had looked to her not only for orders but for hope. She waited until his voice died on its own. Then she asked him if he thought her robe was just cloth, if he thought her gavel was just wood. Her tone was low, steady, but sharper than any blade. The officer blinked, unable to answer, and she continued, telling him that before she wore the robe, she wore armor. Before she raised the gavel, she raised a blade. Her words cut through the chamber.